you. Thank you. Thank you. Hey, Chad, who made aviators popular? Thank you. It's such an honor to be here with you tonight. These are incredible times, aren't they? So much is at stake. In Chad Griffin, this community has a leader fit for these times. So let me begin by saying thank you, Chad. And thank you also to your mom and dad, Betty and Butch, who are also here with us tonight. When I was 13 years old, I stomped down the street of my Willow Grove, Pennsylvania neighborhood and knocked on the door of a boy named Drew. Drew had been making fun of my little sister Bonnie, who was just 9 years old at the time, throwing worms at her again. And she was terrified to go back to the bus stop. He was a serial offender, and I was tired of it. I had no idea what I was going to say to him. So when he opened the door, I pulled back and I punched him right in the face. And then I ran as fast as I could. I hate bullies. At the Biden Foundation, we have several pillars, helping middle-class families like the ones Joe and I grew up in, supporting military families, and advocating for community colleges. Now, some people have asked us, why did we make advancing LGBTQ equality one of our pillars? And there are a lot of answers. The families and the friends we've watched struggle with prejudice and bigotry. Friends like Sarah McBride, who you may know from her speech, who just spoke, who is a Delawarean, but we know her as Sally's daughter, our family friend. And as a teacher for more than 30 years, a lot of teachers, I hope, I watched my students wrestle with who they are. Through their writing, I get a window into their thoughts, and it can be upsetting to see the hate they've had to deal with and the rawness of their pain. But for Joe and me, what it really comes down to is that there is nothing that makes either of us more angry than a bully. There's nothing that's more unfair or unjust than people using their power to try to make other people feel small, to tell them who they are or what they are capable of, to say their identity doesn't belong. Whether it's someone picking up on my sister or people telling our friends and neighbors that their love doesn't count, there is nothing that makes us want to pick a fight more than that. That's why we knew that the challenges facing the LGBTQ community had to be part of the Biden Foundation work. We knew that when the history books are written, we want to be on the side of equality. And tell you, it's been a real privilege for us to get to work with you. The courage, tenacity, and resilience of you, our brothers and sisters, is inspiring. Joe and I feel incredibly lucky to call ourselves your allies. Some of you may have read Garth Greenwell's novel, What Belongs to You, about the loneliness and struggle of closeted desire. In it, Greenwell wrote, "Love isn't just a matter of looking at someone, but also looking with them, of facing what they face. All of us deserve someone at our side facing life with us." So that's why I'm proud to introduce the man who's been at my side, an ally and champion for equality, a man whose life purpose stems from the profound commitment to civil rights, a man who always speaks from the heart. Please join me in welcoming my husband, Joe Biden.
Hey, guys. Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. What a wonderful crowd. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Please. Although I've been around a long time, I wasn't there when Adlai Stevenson was running for president, but Adlai Stevenson had an expression. He said, "Flattery is fine as long as you don't inhale." I look out at all of you, and thank you. Guys, my name is Joe Biden. I'm Jill Biden's husband. That's how I'm known in my family. That's how I'm known by everyone who knows us both. And I'm proud of it. Chad, thank you. Chad, thank you for the kind introduction and for your leadership and commitment to this cause. And it's a cause. I think it is, and I've said this for the last 10 years, it's the civil rights issue of our day. It's about, I'm not looking for applause. It's about who we are as a country, who we are as a people, and that's not hyperbole. Folks, I told you before, Chad, for example, gave me credit for coming out early, but it was very late. It was very late, early for marriage equality. I told the team that asked me to join them as vice president that I would not affirmatively make the case, but that if I was asked, I would not remain silent. And I've told you this before. This was not difficult for me. It took nothing. It just was, as I told some of you before, I learned early on from my father, it's a simple proposition. I was being dropped off at the City Hall in Wilmington, Delaware, a place called Rodney Square, to get an application to be a lifeguard in the African-American community where I wanted to work on the East Side in the projects. And I was 17 years old. As I got out of the car, two men dressed in suits, one heading to the Hercules building, the other one heading to the DuPont Company building, leaned over and kissed one another, embraced, and I just turned and looked at my dad. And this is what he said to me. He said, "Joey, it's simple. They love each other. It's simple." dad was a generous, decent, honorable man who thought that everyone, and I mean everyone, deserved to be treated with dignity. And that's how he treated people. But here's the deal. Also, on behalf of Jill and myself and the entire Biden family, we want to thank the HRC for honoring our deceased son, Attorney General Beau Biden, back in June. Now, it meant a great deal to us. Back in June 2015, just a month after he had died, you and this community honored him. He was one who spearheaded in July of 2013 in the state of Delaware the Marriage Equality Act that passed, became law in Delaware, statute. At the time, one of only a few states in the nation. He also joined with a group of other attorney generals, I believe there are 9 of them, and filing an amicus brief with the Supreme Court to challenge the Defense of Marriage Act. And in June of 2013, he led, as Sarah will tell you, Sarah used to work for my son, Beau. And Sarah said something to me that meant a lot backstage. She said, I could have never, ever, ever made it without Beau, because Beau understood human dignity. In June of 2013, he led the Gender Identity Non-Discrimination Act, which gave, by legislative, not just by executive order, legislatively dictated that every transgender person, every transgender American deserved the right that every other American had. And so, he also got in a little bit of trouble with the Marriage Equality Act when the state of Utah, there was someone married and Utah didn't recognize the marriage and they moved to Delaware. He recognized the marriage anyway. And so, some of you know my son Hunter, who is as committed and ran the World Food Program USA as an attorney. He feels as strongly as Beau did. And my daughter Ashley runs one of the largest nonprofits in the state and is an absolute acolyte of Beau's and trying to change things. Civil rights, the civil rights debate that continues in America. But what you have done with Chad's leadership is you have taken this movement and not put a different face on it, but a different sense of urgency, the urgency of now. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge my friend and former Attorney General. I thought he was here, he may not be, Eric Holder. Are you here, Eric? Eric was one of the guys, along with, what happened was when I made that announcement on Meet the Press, all of a sudden there was a cascade out of the administration, starting with our Secretary of Education, Arnie Duncan, who's a great guy. But he was great. And tonight's recipient of your HRC Equality Award, a very talented actress who has as much moral courage as she has talent, Anne Hathaway. I don't know where Anne is. And a fellow Scrantonian, Olympian, Adam Rippon. And also my good personal friend and friends of his mother and my son Beau, one of the great leaders of the transgender equality cause, Sarah McBride, who was up here earlier. And as a point, as they used to say in the Senate when I served there, as a point of personal privilege. She's not going to be here till 8:30. I wanted to recognize her and actually have her come up here, but Danica Roem. Now, I called Danica early to endorse her and encourage her, and she would have won by 10 more points had I not done that publicly. But we had a great conversation on election night. I'll never forget it. I'll never forget her enthusiasm and her absolute determination and commitment. You know, ever since the last time I've spoken to you from this stage, has been pointed out, we've made progress, notwithstanding the onslaught by this administration and the regressive elements in American society. But it was a time of tremendous progress and historic change that you helped guide us through in our administration. Because of you, particularly people like Dennis and Judy Shepard, I don't know where you are, folks, but stand up. I know Jill and I know what it's like to lose a child. We understand the pain never goes away. And I admire, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, I admire your courage in every single day, taking on the elements that caused your son's death. But it takes enormous courage, because every time you do, it takes you back to the moment you got the news. We owe you. And I hope you know how grateful we are as a nation for all that you have done these 20 years. To speak out and demand a better, safer world for our children. And the truth is, the speed with which things have changed is no thanks to any national figure. It's because of people, like I just introduced, people who had courage to come out and speak. That's why I'm so happy to be here to say thank you. Thank you to generations of brave advocates, from Stonewall to ACT UP to PFLAG moms to student leaders. We've come this far because you spoke up, because you demanded justice, because you've been denied too long. And you did it despite the voices of intolerance that tried to tear you down. And many of you, especially those of you closer to my age, paid an enormous personal price, a professional price, and literally put your lives in jeopardy to speak out. That's why we are here today. You risked your livelihoods, your very personal well-being, but your tenacity, your integrity, literally bent the arc, the moral arc of this nation, much more toward justice. And thanks to you, our children, my grandchildren, will grow up in a world that's far more just, open-minded, and humane. But our work is not yet done by any stretch of the imagination. The stakes are much too high. And as I said, we've faced with an administration and some of its most ardent right-wing supporters, from the Ku Klux Klan, the head of the Ku Klux Klan is endorsed, and the alt-right, who are trying to undo all the progress you made with you. American people are better than this. I promise you, they don't know that is possible. We should be reminding them day in and day out that that is still possible, because they will not support it. And as Chad said, transgender Americans are still under attack in state legislatures and face an epidemic of violence that claims far too many of their lives each year. And around the world, LGBTQ individuals face terror and torture. Chechnya, El Salvador, Malaysia, Tanzania, even some of our democratic allies like Romania appear to be giving way to some narrow-minded, divisive politics that have tried to define family here at home. The same kind of people. Any person of conscience, regardless of the religious or partisan beliefs, should be able to agree that discrimination and violence against any person in any form and is simply intolerable, illegal, wrong. As you know, when I was vice president, I spent a lot of time traveling around the world, and I'd speak out about this issue in these countries. And I'd be told in some of the countries it's cultural. Well, let me tell you something. Those who try to excuse this kind of discrimination in the name of culture, I say, prejudice is prejudice and humanity is humanity. It is a crime. And using religion or culture as a license to discriminate, demonizing the community, individuals to score political points, is no more justifiable around the world than it is here at home, and our policy should reflect that. But despite losing in the courts and in the court of public opinion, these forces of intolerance remain determined to undermine and roll back the progress you all have made. This time, they, not you, have an ally in the White House. This time, they have an ally. They're a small percentage of the American people, virulent people, some of them the dregs of society. And instead of using the full might of the executive branch to secure justice, dignity, safety for all, the president uses the White House as a literal bully pulpit, callously exerting his power over those who have little or none. Some of you in this room may be fortunate enough to live in cities or work for companies who are protected by law or by policy, with privilege and access to defend yourselves and your families. But across the country, too many of our fellow Americans lack those basic comforts. And that's especially true for young people. Many of you are familiar with the Trevor Project and the suicide hotline they run. Just think of having to say those two phrases together: a project and a suicide hotline. I recently learned that the 2 days they had the highest call volume were the day after Trump was elected in 2016 and the day President Trump tweeted his new policy banning transgender patriots from serving in the military. There were the 2 days. And despite all the progress we've made, there are still so many young people in America who feel so abandoned, so alone, so afraid. They struggle to picture a future in which they're safe, affirmed, or loved. Some of you don't have to imagine what that's like because you lived through it. You remember those sleepless nights lying in bed as a kid, staring at the ceiling, wondering if or when to come out. What do I say? What are they going to say to me? What will happen? The terror in your heart when you first spoke your truth. Coach, I'm gay. Mom, I'm transgender. Not knowing how your loved one might respond. Looking down the street, how many of you have done this? Looking down the street and looking behind you to see who's watching before you hold your partner's hand or steal a kiss. Literally looking over your shoulder all the time. That you're here tonight speaks to your strength and to your resilience. But I suspect many of you got some help along the way. The teacher who may have looked out for you in the classroom and even in the hallways of your school. The relative or neighbor who stood up for you when others wouldn't. The faith leader who reminded you that we're all born perfect, created in God's image. The friends who filled the void of your biological family with their unconditional love, acceptance, and support when you did not get it at home. Sadly, too many of our young people are rejected, not just by their communities, but by their families. Blood of my blood, bone of my bone. Kicked out of their homes. Subject to the vile practice of conversion therapy that our vice president promoted. I recently heard from a Delaware teacher who contacted me. She told me about a transgender student who, in her words, was so hurt by her family that she dropped out of school and ran away from home, relocating thousands of miles to an unknown and risky future, end of quote. You all know better than I do, although I know individuals who went through it. That kind of rejection is all too common. In 2018, in the United States of America. Some of you know about a young man named Seth Owen. In many ways, Seth is blessed. Valedictorian of his high school class, captain of his swim team, class president, a child any parent would be proud of. But Seth's parents saw things differently. Because he was gay, they sent him to conversion therapy to, quote, turn him straight. His father literally threatened to stone him, the son of a gun. No, it's just wrong. And when his parents gave him an ultimatum, he had no choice but to move out. Fortunately, Seth had teachers and coaches and friends who looked out for him. And thanks to them and thousands of new friends across the country who heard his story, Seth is now a freshman at Georgetown University. I just got a chance to meet Seth backstage, and Seth is here tonight with his former coach, Kaylee. Where are you? Can we figure out where Seth is? I want you to see this young man. I don't know where the devil you are, Seth. Over there. Be strong, man. We're proud of you. I have your back. We have your back. The country has your back. Be proud. No court decision, law, policy, or poll as my mom would say, God love you, son. No court decision or law or policy or poll can replace the impact of the loss of unconditional love. It's not how we're made up. It's not the measure of decency. Michelle is a mother of an active duty Marine who came out to her over Skype while, like my son, was deployed for a year overseas as a Marine. In Michelle's words, quote, she could see, quote, a huge weight lifted off of him when he came out with her. And when her son said he was afraid, quote, you and Dad wouldn't love me anymore, can you imagine? Her response was exactly what every parent's response ought to be. She said, I'll love you even more. Because every single time you meet someone who has hate in them, I'm sending extra love your way to get you through those tough times. That's what mothers should do. Imagine how relieved that young Marine must have felt at that moment. Imagine the burden lifted off of him. And many of you know it. To feel that certainty of a parent's love while deployed thousands of miles away in a battle zone. To know you're not alone. We can't rest till all of our young people are affirmed and accepted the same exact way. That's why Jill and I, when we set up the Biden Foundation, as she spoke about, recently launched an initiative, As You Are. That's the name of the initiative, As You Are. It's the beginning of a massive public education campaign to raise awareness of the importance of family acceptance in the lives of LGBTQ young people. We're collaborating with the YMCA and other organizations to raise this to a level that everyone understands. We're collecting personal stories from youth, parents, educators, coaches, and others to highlight the critical importance of affirming, accepting, and supporting all of our young people, and making them aware of the harm that results from rejection, including a disproportionately high suicide rate. We've just begun this project. We've already collected over 500 submissions from people across America, 2 of which you heard from tonight. Some are heartbreaking, others are inspiring, but all of them speak to the importance of family and community acceptance. Acceptance. Being allowed to understand, people understand your dignity. People fear what and who they don't know and what they don't understand. That's why these stories have such incredible power, to reveal our common struggles and shared humanity. Together we have to work together to change our culture, our literal culture, to ensure a bright future for all of our young people. And like Chad, and I know I'm always referred to as the White House optimist, and the reason I'm optimistic, I understand the history of the journey of this country. I know we can do this, but I realize people these days, and maybe many of you are pessimistic because of the personal and political onslaught against the community from so many quarters. But I am optimistic because I really do know the history of the journey of the American people. They're decent. What's happened in the last 10 years? They found out their best friend in school was gay. And they know he's a good guy, has the same values. They find out that the girl you played lacrosse with or you studied with in study hall is a lesbian. And you know how decent and honorable and what a value set she has and what contributions she can make. My optimism does not mean we turn away from the dark realities, but understanding the story of the journey of this country and this community is important. The virulent examples that we're witnessing today are not who we are. That's not America. That's not who the vast majority of the American people are. The vast majority of the American people are already with us. Chad knows because when I came out on Meet the Press, I went in on Monday and a lot of the campaign people, and we were in a re-election campaign, remember, with Rahman, and I was told how I was ruining the chances. And I said, I'll make you a bet. The American people are already way ahead of us. And by the way, a poll was done that week. 57% of the American people already supported gay marriage. But this onslaught that we're seeing does require us not only to be vigilant, but be more aggressive and demand more of our leaders who represent basic American values of respect, decency, equality, giving hate no safe haven. We hold these truths self-evident. All men are created equal, endowed by their Creator. Sounds corny when you say it. But the American people, basically, in their gut, we've never met it, but that's the aspiration, and they're not giving up on it. You know, Barack and I agreed to remain silent for a while to give this administration a chance to get up and running the first year. God forgive me. But I could not remain silent after Charlottesville. No, I want to be deadly earnest with you about this. That's why I wrote an article for Atlantic Magazine entitled "The Battle for America's Soul," because don't clap, or you can boo if you want, but don't clap. But I'm serious. I'm serious. This is about basic decency. The idea that goons could come out of fields at night with lighted torches carrying Nazi flags, chanting the same exact anti-Semitic bile that was chanted in the streets of Nuremberg and Berlin and every other German city in the 30s. No, but look, get serious, guys. So hush up. This is deadly earnest. We are in a fight for America's soul. And we have leaders who at the time when that occurred, when these guys were accompanied by white supremacists and Ku Klux Klan and those who objected, making a comparison saying they're good people in both groups. What has become of us? Our children are listening, and our silence is complicity. So I don't have to ever now say, I have confidence, because as we stand up in the face of this onslaught, the vast majority of the American people are with us. It's the story of supporting many brave Americans who came out and spoke up, from the earliest activities of the trailblazers like Marsha P. Johnson, who stood in the front lines of liberation. Those loving couples who fought for the freedom to marry all the way to the Supreme Court and won. And it's all of you coming out, living with pride, telling your stories. Last week in India, the country of India, it wasn't just what they did, it's how they did it. Their Supreme Court unanimously decided to decriminalize homosexuality. And it's no accident that in that Supreme Court ruling in India, they cited landmark U.S. Supreme Court decisions giving people equality. Folks, this outfit thinks the rest of the world follows us because of the example of our power. It's the power of our example that has allowed us to lead the world. And it resonates around the world. All of you here tonight, and those who are no longer with us, your courage, and I think you underestimate it, gives millions of people hope. That kid who might see part of what you're doing tonight, knowing that there are thousands and thousands of people who have come forward, just may have a little more hope. A little more hope. There's an old expression made famous by Kierkegaard. He said, faith sees best in the dark. It's so dark for so many people. And you remind us that we all have a lot of work to do to stand up to the abuses of power and ensure that everyone is treated with dignity. And one more thing as I close. Some of you heard me say this before, but I say it again, it's not a joke. You guys have done more to free straight women and men than you have gays and lesbians. And you think I'm kidding, so you don't misunderstand me. Think about this one example. A lot of you are very successful businessmen and women. If you were at a fancy restaurant in Washington 5, 6 years ago at an important business meeting, and a gay or lesbian waiter came up, or transgender, spoke with a lisp or demonstrated they were gay or lesbian, and someone at that luncheon table made fun of that person, no one would have said anything. Not a joke. I want you to literally think about this. Today, if that same thing happened, the other 4 or 5 people at the table say, you horse's tail, get out of here. Really. So guys, believe in yourselves. Believe in how much more you can do. The reason my son felt so strongly about this, and Jill and I do, he died of cancer, a terrible disease. We have a foundation to try to end cancer as we know it. This is a disease and a blight on America, this disease of homophobia. And we can end it. And we can save my grandkids, my great-grandkids, and thousands of Americans. and the rest of the world will repair to the American standard. God love you, and may God protect our troops. Thank you. Thank you all for what you do. Thank you. By the way, every time I'd walk out of my grandfather Ambrose Finnegan's house in Scranton, he'd yell, "Joey, keep the faith." And my grandmother would yell, "No, Joey, spread it. Go spread the faith. Vote, 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 vote."